Welcome back again. I am digifox. This channel serves as a diary and my personal opinion of the current blockchain, cryptocurrency, and assets based around the prior two spaces. None of what is stated on this video or any before or after is financial advice. If treated as such, one could lose all currency, assets, and properties they had invested. Today's thoughts and lectures are educational as Algorand provided an open conference with their team and also a head developer. This conference was to show other developers the ability Algorand has and will have in the near or long-term future. If interested in developing or learning in detail of how Algorand works and how to code on it, this lecture might be for you. So everyone gather around, have notes ready.
Is going to be giving us some demos on the albudia integrated development environment. For our live listeners here today, I want to remind you a little bit about the interface that we're using here. So we have tabs for chat and questions and polls and people. I want you to really focus on the questions tab because that's where I want you guys to make this interactive for Satya. So as he's going through the presentation today, ask questions. My colleague Jason Weathersby is also is here, and the two of us are going to be answering these questions as best we can as Satya is going through his presentation. And then for the questions that we can't answer, the questions that we want to answer live, then we'll take those and we'll put them in front of Satya so that he can answer them live. As he's going through his presentation, take a look at the chat tab periodically because I'll paste in the links there for stuff that he's talking about, where you get the code, you know, how to do this stuff. So look periodically within the chat. You guys are free to chat there if you would like as well, but would really rather that you ask questions in the questions tab. That'll help. And the best part is also in the questions tab, you can vote them up. So if you know your friends on the line are asking questions, you're like, that's a good one. Vote it up, and that'll help Jason and I make sure that we're getting answering those ones first or presenting them off to Satya as well. And then a reminder, in 2 weeks' time, upcoming, we'll have the team from MyAlgo Wallet, from Rand Labs, and they'll be talking about their latest release, the MyAlgo Wallet 2.0. So we'll also be doing that one at the same time. So look for that and make sure that you're signing up for that as well at algorand.com/developers. All right, well then, let's get started. Hello and welcome. I'm Ryan Fox on the Developer Relations team at Algorand, and I want to welcome everybody to another edition of our Developer Office Hours. I am pleased to be joined today by Satya Rajan, and he is the author of an awesome tool called albudia. It's an integrated development environment for us. He's joining us today from Singapore, so it is 1 o'clock in the morning for him. So ask good questions. Let's keep him awake. He's got lots of great content to get to and want to make sure that we get to him straight away. Satya.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. Good morning. Thanks, Ryan. Let me just share my screen quickly. Okay.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Satya. I'm the maintainer of Algodia project, and welcome to Algodia demo. A little bit about myself. I'm a software architect, developer in my day job, and I've been in this blockchain industry for last 3.5 years, and mostly learning and building different dev tools for different blockchains. So what is Algodia? So as you know, Algodia is an IntelliJ plugin. It provides end-to-end development lifecycle for development on Algorand blockchain inside your IntelliJ IDE. You can use this plugin to create and test stateful and stateless smart contract directly from your IDE. You can also manage Algorand standard assets from your IDE. You can create and post transaction. You can do atomic transfer, account management, and there are many other features you can do directly from your IntelliJ IDE. These are the few high-level goals of this plugin. The first one is basically to help developer to try out different features provided by Algorand without writing any code. This is particularly helpful for any new developer new to Algorand ecosystem. They can actually try different features provided by Algorand without writing any code. The plugin also provides simple UIs to interact with Algorand for various functionalities. And the third one is plugin tries to basically automate few of the repetitive tasks you usually do during your development lifecycle. Plugin try to automate those tasks as much as possible, right? So with these high-level goals, let's go back a little bit how we can interact with Algorand. So Algorand has many SDKs in different languages. You can programmatically do many operations, many things with Algorand blockchain, right? You can to interact with Algorand blockchain, you can actually write some code and then you can run it to interact with Algorand blockchain. So this sample code is mainly for to create a transaction and to post a transaction to Algorand blockchain. And in this case, we are basically using Algorand Java SDK. So if you see in the left side, we are creating a transaction and then we are setting some attributes to our transaction object, and then we are posting the transaction to Algorand blockchain. But if you are using IntelliJ ID, inside IntelliJ ID, the Algodia plugin basically provides simple UIs. You can use those UI to directly perform those operations without writing any code. So if you see the first UI is to post a transaction or to transfer algo from one account to another account. The second one is to do the same thing but using a stateless smart contract. And the third screenshot is basically for asset management. Okay, so Algodia plugin is currently supported in almost all IntelliJ platform-based IDs. The plugin is currently tested with IntelliJ IDEA, which is a Java ID in IntelliJ ecosystem. Also, it's been tested against PyCharm, which is a Python ID, Golang, which is a Golang ID, WebStorm, which is a JavaScript ID, and PHPStorm, which is a PHP ID. But it should work with any IntelliJ platform-based ID. Just make sure you are using a version 2020.2 or above. So these are some of the useful links for Algodia. The plugin source code is hosted on GitHub. If you want to raise an enhancement request, you can go to the source repo and create an enhancement request, or if you want to raise a bug, you can do that. And the second link is for the documentation. Plugin documentation doc site is hosted here. If I go to the doc site, algodia-docs.blogspin.com, you can see there is a getting started video here. It's a 1-hour video, goes through each and every functionality provided by Algodia. And in every section, you can also find a small video, like 2 to 3 minutes video. You can go through it if you want to learn specific about that particular functionality. Now let's go back to here slide. Okay, the plugin is currently available in IntelliJ official marketplace, so you can directly install this plugin from your IntelliJ ID. You can also manually download the binary from GitHub site and manually install that. So for this is the agenda for today's demo. We'll start with node configuration. We'll see how we can configure a Algorand node inside your IntelliJ ID. Then we'll jump to account management. We'll see how we can create an account, how we can fund an account, and how we can use that account for various operations inside your IntelliJ ID. Then we'll see payment transaction. We'll try to transfer fund from one account to another account. Then we'll go through stateless contract, stateful contract, asset management, atomic transfer, and then we'll cover export transaction, where we'll basically try to export transaction to a JSON file, and we'll also touch a little bit about a try run feature of. So without wasting any time, let's go to the IDE. Okay, so So I'm currently using IntelliJ IDEA version, which is a Java IDE for IntelliJ. So if you see here, there's a plugin section here. To install this plugin, you have to go to the marketplace and just search for Algodia. And it's already installed in my IDE, so I don't need to install it again. Okay, so to start a demo, I have to first create a project. So to create a project, you click new project here. When you click new project here, then you'll see there is a new project type Algorand here. So let me select Algorand, and for now I'll ignore stateful smart contract option. We're going to create an empty project for now. So I'll click next now, and then let's call this project our first project. Okay, so the project is now created. So let me go through the project structure a little bit. If you see here, there is a src folder here, and there's a test folder. Your TL file should go under src folder, and if you see there's a file called algo package.json. This is something like package.json in a node project, or for the Algorand project, algo package.json is the file here, right? It's a metadata file. So for every Algorand project, you need to have this file, and this is the minimal information you need in that file. You need to provide the project name and version. This file is automatically generated by the ID, by the way. And currently in this project, we don't have any stateful smart contract. That's why it's empty now. But if you want to import a project inside IntelliJ ID, you just need to create this file manually and then try to import this project. And once ID see that file, then it will automatically enable all Algorand specific feature in the ID. Okay, now let's jump to node configuration. How can we configure a Algorand node inside our ID? So if you see in the right hand side, there is an Algorand Explorer tab. If you click here, you can see there are like two categories here. One is local SDK and nodes. So to configure a node, Algorand node, you can actually right click here and you can say add Algorand node. So you can configure your own custom Algorand node, or you can configure a pure stack node, or you can also configure a sandbox node. The only thing you need to provide here is a ALGO API endpoint and API key. And if you are configuring a pure stack node, you have to provide indexer API endpoint also. Right. For me, in my ID, I have already configured my local node here, and I also have a pure stack node here. Right. If I right click on the local server node, I can see, okay, this is my API endpoint and this is the API key. And if you click on fetch network info, it will fetch the network info, and for me, it's a test network node. The second category is basically local SDK. If I right click and do add a local SDK, this is basically if you have Algorand binary available in your local machine, you can actually point to the folder. The main purpose of this category is you can use goal binary to compile your TL file. That's optional. You can use a Algorand node to both compile and deployment, but you have also an option to compile your TL file using goal. Right. So for this demo, let's say I select my this local server node and I right click and I can say, okay, use this for compilation and use this custom node for deployment also. Right. So our node configuration is now done. So we have two nodes here, and local SDK is configured, and we have selected Algorand server node, which is the first node, as our compilation target and deployment target. So, but to interact with Algorand blockchain, we need some account, and we need some algos in that account. So then let's go to account management section. So if you right click on the editor, or if you right click on the project, you can see a Algorand option here, menu option here. So you click there, and then you can see accounts, and then you can go to list account. So now we're going to create a few accounts which we'll be using for this demo. Let me create the first account. Let's call our first account as Alice. So this is the, you can actually give a name to your account, so you can recognize it whenever you are using it later. So our first account is Alice. So our first account is created now. Let's create the second account and let's call it Bob. And let's create one more account and let's call it Sam. So we have now 3 accounts which we'll be using for this demo. And if I do fetch balance, because we have already configured node, the balance of this of all this account are basically 0, right? Same way, we can also import a external account. If you want to import an account, you can provide an account name, you can provide mnemonic, and say okay. You can also import an account as a read-only account. So you just select this checkbox and provide an account name and just provide an account address. This is useful whenever you want to, let's say it's a contract account, you just want to check the balance of that account, you can do so. Okay, so if you right click on this account, any of this account, and to show detail, you can now see the detail of that particular account. So if you see here, the account name is Alice, the address is this one, and the balance is 0, and created apps, created assets, and opt-in assets, everything is empty because we have not used this account to create any app or assets, or we have not opted into any asset yet. So let's close this, and our account is now created. The next step is basically we have to transfer some fund to this account. Let's right click on Alice account and copy this address, and I'll go to the browser now, and I'll search for Algorand faucet, and the very first search result is basically testnet faucet. So I'll paste my account address and I have to select. Okay, so the transaction is now successful, and now hopefully if you go to accounts again, list of account, and if you do fetch balance, okay, so now we have like 100 algo in Alice account. Okay, so Alice has 100 algo now. Let's try to do our very first payment transaction. We'll try to transfer some algo from Alice account to Bob's account. So to do that, again, we have to right click. You can select Algorand. Then you can see an option here, transfer, right? Click on that, and now you can click here, select Alice account because Alice has some algo, and our transfer asset type is algo in this case, and let's select the to account as Bob's account, and let's transfer, let's say 20 algo from Alice account to Bob's account. If you do okay, now you can see the transaction is been now posted to the network from Alice account to Bob's account with 20 algo, and it's using my testnet node. So the transaction is now successful, and there is a link to the transaction detail here. So if you click this, it will take you to the ALGO Explorer, and in ALGO Explorer you can see the detail of the transaction, and that's how the payment transaction is done in IntelliJ. Okay, so now before jumping to the next section, let me show a little bit about multisig account. So in the account option, you can also create a multisig account. So to create a multisig account, you can select this option, and here you can select the threshold, and you can select different accounts. We have 3 accounts. Let's select all 3 accounts here, and you can say okay. So if you see here in the console, our multisig account is now created. Now to see the list of multisig account, you can go to list multisig account, and you can see there is one multisig account with threshold 2, and these are the accounts for that multisig account. You can do fetch balance to get the balance for the multisig account, but the balance is currently 0. And this is how the account management is done in Algodia. And this what the account created here will be useful for other operation. So after account management, let's jump to our jump to stateless contract, right? So we'll try to create a stateless contract in this project and try to see how we can use the stateless contract to post a transaction. To create a stateless contract, what you can do, you have to go to source. If you right click here, you can select new, you can see the TIL file option here. And by default, there are many templates available here. Let me close this. So I'll select again new TIL file. Okay, let me select the first, let me give a name dynamic fee in this case and select this dynamic fee template. Okay, so now you can see we have a TIL file now generated from this dynamic fee template. I want to highlight few of the editor level feature here. So the ID supports code completion for all opcodes supported by supported in TIL. So if you do right control space, you can see the list of opcodes TIL supported in TIL. And let me select TXN in this case, and then again if you do control space, you can see all the fields supported by TXN opcode, right? So similarly, if you select GTXN and do control space, it gives all the options available for group transaction. So if you see that this code completion is context specific, based on the opcode is actually showing list of available options. So similarly, if you hover on top of any of these opcode, you can actually get a nice little tooltip which shows the help documentation for this particular opcode. So if you see here, there is a link to official doc here. If you click this link, it will take you to the official documentation page and to the right section. In this case, it's GTXN, right? So this is how the editor level features work here in the IntelliJ IDE. So let's try to compile this TIL file. So if you try to compile this TIL file, it's actually asking for some input. The reason is there are various placeholders in this file. If I cancel this and go back to the TIL file here, if you see this bar_tmpl_2 CLS, these are all placeholder. So if in your TIL file you want to keep some placeholder, you have to just use this prefix var_tmpl_ placeholder name. So whenever you try to compile this TIL file, the IDE will automatically ask you the actual value for this placeholder. Let's say for this case, we'll just put this value 111. Of course, this will not be compiled, but I want to show something here. So let's try to compile this thing. Okay, the compilation failed as expected. But if you try to compile it again, now you can see the values are automatically populated. So basically the IDE remembers all these values. So next time when you try to compile, it will automatically, the values will be automatically populated. So let's delete this file for now, and let's create another template, another stateless contract. Okay, so let me right click again and I'll create another contract. Let's say simple.TIL, and I'm going to copy some code from my editor. Okay, so this is a simple stateless contract where if you see here, what we're doing, we're checking receiver field of the transaction. And if we are saying if the transaction receiver field is same as this address and the transaction amount is less than 10 algo, approve this transaction. Otherwise, the transaction will be rejected, right? But instead of hard coding this value here, let's put a placeholder here. Let's keep the placeholder as var_template_receiver, right? And let me go to the account management again, and I'll try to copy Bob's account in this case. Okay, and let's try to compile this. If I right click and say compile till, now I can enter Bob's address here, and I need to do OK. Now the transaction is successful, and if you see here, there is a generated source folder here. So because we have a placeholder here, the ID actually ID has generated a file here with the Bob's address here, right? So, and if you go to the build folder here, you can see the compiled simple.til.talk file is here. So now let's go back to the editor again. Now the til file is compiled successfully, but let's create a logixig using this file. So you can go to Algorand again, select stateless contract, and you can do generate logixig. Right, and this value is automatically populated. This is Bob's address, and I can do OK. This is the UI for creating logixig or logic signature file. So you can select different mode for your logixig. For this use case, let's say test will use mode as delegated signature, and let's select the signing account as Alice account because Alice has some fund. Okay, and then if you press OK, the logixig file will be now generated. So if you see here under build folder, there's a lsig folder, and under lsig, we have our logixig file generated here. And you can also see there is a simple metadata JSON file. You don't need to do anything in this file. This file is used by IDE to keep track of some of the metadata for this logixig file.
Okay. May I interject just momentarily here? Will you maximize the app? Sometimes it doesn't. There we go. Sometimes it isn't giving the screen refresh properly. Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, so our logixig file is now created. So now the next thing we can do, we can use this logixig file to create a transaction and post that transaction, right? So basically, we'll try to sign this transaction using this logixig file. So to do that, you can right-click on this, and you can see there are various options here, right? There is a send transaction option here, which will basically create a payment transaction. So you can click this, and now if you notice here, the ID automatically reads this file and then automatically detects, okay, this is a logic signature, delegated signature logixig file, and the sender address is automatically populated. And in this case, this is Alice account. Let's select the receiver account, and let's select receiver account as Sam's account. And let's keep the asset type as algo, and let's try to transfer like 8 algo, and press OK. Okay, if you notice here, the transaction is being rejected by logic. The reason here is during compilation we had given Bob's account, not Sam's account, but we're trying to transfer fund to Sam's account. So we can retry the same thing again with Bob's account, and hopefully the transaction will be successful now. So now instead of selecting Sam's account, we'll select Bob's account. And before that, let's check the balance of Bob's account. Bob's account current balance is 20. And let's transfer 8 algo, because we have to send the algo amount should be less than 10. And then click OK. Now the transaction being submitted to the network, and let's wait for some time. So it should be successful. Yeah, so the transaction is now successful, and if you see the log here, it was signed by our lsig. So now if I click here, it will take me to the algo explorer, and now you can see the transaction detail, and you can see the til file, logic which actually signed this particular transaction. So this is how you can create a til file. You can use the til file to create a logixig file, and then you can use the logixig file to approve or reject a transaction, right? So before jumping to the next section, maybe let me show one more thing. Let me go back to the send transaction screen again. And if you see here, there are different options here, right? There are 3 buttons here. One is export transaction, export sign transaction, and dry run, right? So let me explain what exactly it means. So let me select receiver account as Bob's account, and again provide amount is 8. So now instead of posting the transaction to the network, I can do export transaction, which will basically create a JSON file, transaction file under TXN folder, right? And you can use this to submit transaction offline if you want to do that. Similarly, we have another option here. If you see, there is just export signed transaction, which will be basically a signed. It will create a JSON file with the signed transaction detail. And the third option is basically dry run. If you want to debug your deal contract, you can do that using dry run. In case of dry run, you don't usually submit a transaction. It will just try to do the dry run and show you the result. Let me try that. So if I select dry run in this case, and you can actually save the result in a file. And in this case, if you go up, you can see here. Okay, the result is basically passed, right? Because we have provided Bob's account, and the dry run file usually you'll find under dry run folder under build. Okay, so that's it from the stateless contract side. Let's create a stateful contract, and we'll see how we can create a stateful contract, and how we can deploy a stateful contract, and how we can interact with the stateful contract. But to do that, let's create another project. So in this case, I'll select Algorand again, and I'll select stateful contract here. And by default, ID will create a stateful contract with this name. And this is the approval program, and this is the clear state program. So I'll click next, and let's call it stateful contract. Okay, so our stateful contract is now let me close this and create again. First stateful contract. Okay, so now this is our stateful contract, and because we selected stateful contract option, so ID by default created a stateful contract in this project. Now, if you open this algo package.json, you can see there is an entry for stateful contract with the approval program and clear state program, and this contract is a very simple contract, and what it's basically doing, it's keeping a global state, which is called counter, and every time you call this contract, it will increase the contract value, increase the counter value by 1, right? Before deploying this contract, let me show you one more thing. Let's say you can have multiple stateful contract in a project. So to do that, you can do new, and you can select this option, stateful till configuration, and in this dialog, you can see there is one stateful contract here. To create another one, you can select new, and you can say, let's say, contract 2, and then you have to select a TIL file. For now, let me just select the same TIL file, but you can create a new TIL file and select it here. Okay, so I have now 2 contracts in this project. You can see there are like 2 entries here, right? Okay, so let's try to deploy this contract, which is a counter contract, and there is only one global statement in here. So to deploy this contract, I can right click again, and I have to go to Algorand, and then I can select stateful contract and create app. Okay, so because this is a new project and we have not selected our node for this project, we have to first select the node, right? We have to select our compilation target, and we have to select our deploy target. This is another way to select the same thing, or whatever we saw here from this tab. Okay, so now we can try to create our contract, deploy our contract again to the create app option. Okay, this is the dialog for, or the UI for creating the app for stateful contract. So I have to select the account now. Let me select Ali's account here, and the contract is stateful contract 1. Because we are maintaining one global state here, so I'll change this to 1 for global int, and I'll do OK. Now if you see the transaction being submitted to the network, and hopefully it will be successful. Yes, it is successful now, and now we can click here, and we can check in the Algo Explorer our stateful contract is now deployed, right? Okay, the stateful contract is now deployed. Now let's try to interact with this contract. To interact with this contract, again, we can go to stateful contract, and then there's an option called call, right? And if you see here, there's a drop down where the ID actually keeps track of all the ID of application ID of all the contracts you have deployed so far for this project. You can select the ID, or you can just say, okay, use the last deployed ID. Right. Once you do that, then you have to provide a signing account. Let's select Bob's account. We don't need to opt to an opt-in transaction for this contract because we are just maintaining global state. There is no local state, so that should be okay for now. And we can select OK. Now, if you see, we're trying to invoke this contract, and we're making a no transaction here, and the transaction is successful now. Again, you can go to Algo Explorer, and you can check the status here, right? So the next thing we can do, we have a global state here, right? To check the value of this global variable, which is global state, which is counter, you can actually go to read state here, and let's say we want to see the global state, and select use last deploy ID, and do OK. And you can see our counter value is now 2 because we invoke this contract once. So similarly, if you go to stateful contract, you can see there are various operations. You can opt into a contract, stateful contract. You can delete an application. You can update an application with a updated approval program or clear state program. You can close out. You can clear state. These are all life cycle of a stateful contract. You can do all those things from your ID. Okay, so this is how you can create a stateful contract, and you can interact with a stateful contract from your Algorand ID. So the next thing we are going to see is assets, right? Algorand standard assets. So inside Algorand, you can actually create different assets, and I'm going to show how you can create that inside IntelliJ ID. So to create an asset, you can right click again, and you can go to assets, and you can select create asset. And this is the UI to create an asset. And let's say for now we want to create an asset called intj or IntelliJ. And intj, this is our unit name, and then you have to provide a total supply for this. So let's give the total supply as 200 million. I hope I'm doing correctly. And let's keep the decimal 0 for now. Okay, so to create an asset, you have to give a creator address. So let's select the creator address as Alice address, and let's select manager address as Alice address, and for now let's select reserve address as Bob's address. Okay, then you have to just click OK to create the asset. And if you see here, again, our asset creation transaction is being now posted to the network, and our first asset is now created. If you click here, and now you can see we have a token called intj with supply 200 million, right? And we have reserve address and creator address set to whatever we have set during creation. Now let's go back and try to modify this asset. So to modify an existing asset, you can again go to select the modify option here, and then you can see drop down to see all the assets created by you. And this is not project specific. Any asset you create using this IntelliJ ID, the ID will basically remember there. So this is the asset we created. So select the asset and then select search. Then you can see the asset detail. Now let's say you want to remove this reserve address. Let's remove this. And once the address is removed and you modify this, you will not be able to change this address anymore in the future. So let's click OK. Okay, so our address modification, asset modification is done. Now if you go again, select asset and modify and select the same intj token, now you can see it's changed. So reserve address is now empty. And one thing you can notice, the transaction sender, which is the manager address, is automatically populated whenever you are trying to modify this asset. So similar to a stateful contract, you can also manage life cycle of a Algorand standard asset directly from your ID. You can opt into an asset, freeze, unfreeze, revoke. Also, you can destroy an asset directly from your ID. So we have an asset now, which is intj. Let's try to transfer some intj token from one account to another account. So we can go to Algorand and account. Go to list account again. If you right click on Alice account now and do show detail, you can see Alice has this intj token, and all 200 million tokens are basically assigned to Alice, right? So what we can do, we'll try to transfer some intj token from Alice to Bob's account, right? But to do that, first Bob has to first opt into that asset. So to do the opt-in transaction, so we have to select opt-in and select token again, and now we have to select Bob's account because Bob wants to opt into this asset, and you select opt-in. Okay, now you can see our opt-in transaction is successful. Now we should be able to transfer some intj token from Alice account to Bob's account. So to do that, again, you can right click here and you can go to the same transfer option. It's whatever we used before. And here we can select Alice account now as sender. And then instead of asset type algo, we have to select Algorand standard asset here. And you can do fetch asset, and you can see Alice is like 200 million intj token, and then the receiver account, let's select Bob's account. And let's say we want to transfer 1000 intj token from Alice account to Bob's account. Then we say OK. So now you can see here we're transferring 1000 intj token from Alice account to Bob's account, and the transaction is now successful. Same way, if you click here, then you can see the detail. So we successfully transfer 1000 intj token from Alice account to Bob's account. Right. So that's how you can use asset management feature in IntelliJ to create a new asset, modify and transfer the asset from one account to another account. So you can also use a logix file to transfer your asset. There is a separate window for that. Maybe let me quickly show that. Let me create a new stateless contract. Again, let's call it simple, and just place int1 so that every transaction will be approved if you are using this logix. And let me just generate a logix file quickly. Okay, so if you see here, okay, if you want to use a logix file to transfer an asset, you can just right click on the logix file and select the same send transaction option here, and in this dialog basically you have to select Algorand standard asset, and everything else is exactly same. Okay, so this is how the asset management is done. And let's go to the next section. Next section is basically atomic transfer. So Algorand has a unique feature which is called atomic transfer, where you can actually group multiple transactions together and then post those transactions as a group to the network. So if one of the transactions fails, the whole group will fail. If the transaction to become successful, every transaction in that group has to be successful. But posting an atomic transfer to Algorand network is a multi-step process. You have to first create a group, then you have to assign that group to individual transaction, and then you have to sign those transactions individually, and then you have to post the transaction to the network as a group. So let's see how Algodia simplify that. So if you to create an atomic transfer, first we need to create a few transactions. Let me first create a transaction. We're not going to post a transaction to the network. Let's create a first transaction as a stateful contract transaction. We already have a stateful contract, so I'm just going to do the same thing to invoke this contract, but instead of posting this transaction to the network, I'll just do export transaction here, and I'll say this is a stateful transaction, right? So you can, if you see here, we have a JSON file created here under txn folder. Let's create another transaction using this logix file, and in this case, let's select this send transaction option here for the logix file, and we'll try to transfer some fund to Bob's account, and let's transfer like 7 algo. And again, instead of posting this transaction to the network, we'll just do export transaction, and this is our stateless contract, stateless transaction. And our second transaction is there. Let's create a third transaction, which will be a payment transaction. And in this case, we'll transfer some token from Alice's account to Bob's account. And let's say in this case, we'll transfer another 2000 intj token. Again, we'll just do export transaction, and we'll say this is a payment transaction, right? So now if you see, there are like 3 files, JSON file. One is for payment transaction, another one is for stateful transaction, and the third one is our stateless transaction. So what we can do now, we want to create a atomic transfer for all these 3 transactions, right? So you can right click here again, go to Algorand, and we can select atomic transfer option here. And this is the window dialog for atomic transfer. What you can do here, now we can select individual transaction. Let's select our first transaction as stateful transaction. The second transaction is stateless transaction, and the third transaction is payment transaction. So we have now 3 transactions here, and the next step we have to basically create a group. If you do create group, a group ID will be generated. And if you right click on individual transaction, you can actually see there's a group ID assigned to each of these transactions, right? If you right click and do show detail, you can see the detail. Okay, so group ID is assigned to each of these transactions. The next step is you have to sign the transaction. So you have to click on each of these transactions, and you can do sign. The first one is stateful transaction. So signing account is automatically populated. You just need to click sign. And the first transaction is now signed. The second transaction is a stateless transaction. Again, it is signed, but it's a stateless transaction, so you have to select a logix file in this case. So we select logix option, and then we select the corresponding logix file here, and select sign. So the stateless transaction is now signed. Then the third transaction is the payment transaction. Here, the signing account is already there, and we select sign again. Okay, so all 3 transactions are now signed. Now the next thing we need to do, we just need to press OK. So what will happen, now the ID is trying to post the transaction to the network. Okay, now our group transaction, the atomic transfer is now successfully done. Now if you see here, there's a link to group detail. Now if I click here, it will take me to the group transaction page, so you can see the status of our atomic transfer. So we had like 3 transactions, all 3 transactions are successful, so that's why our atomic transfer is successful in this case. So that's it from atomic transfer side. You can also dry run an atomic transfer, so you can provide if you try to write an atomic transfer, you have to. I just want to show this, so you can, if you right click here, you can also provide a dry run source here, and it's exactly the same as the dry run we did for stateful contract. Okay, so we almost cover all the thing here in the agenda. But before ending this demo, I want to show one more thing, last thing. Let me close this ID, and not only til file, you can also use pytil using inside your intj ID. So right now, actually, I opened a Python ID, which is PyCharm, and what I'm going to show, I'm going to show how you can actually write a pytil file and how the code completion and other feature work in this ID. So let me just quickly show that this is PyCharm. So it's actually same. You can select Algorand here, and let me just create a empty project for now, Py project or something like that, and create. Okay, so the project structure is exactly same, but in this case, instead of creating a til file, we'll create a pytil file. And if you see, there are various template available for pytil also. And let's call like a empty project, empty file, it's simple file. So you can now see this is a Python file generated from the template, and you have to basically configure your Python interpreter here. And that's it. So now if I do app dot, then you can see all the code completion specific to pytil here, right? Only one thing you have to do here, if you go to preference, I have already installed pytil library for my Python interpreter, so you can actually go here and you can install it if you have not installed it in your local machine. You can just click OK, plus here and search for pytil and install it. But in my ID, I've already installed, so it's just works out of box. So that's it for today's demo. What is next for Algodia? So next, I think. Of course, I'll be continuing working on the bug fixes. If you find any defect in the ID in the plugin, please feel free to file a bug. And if you have any enhancement request, you can do that in the project website, project GitHub repo. There are a few other possible enhancement, like we can also generate client-side code in JavaScript. So the ID can automatically generate some JavaScript code in future, and you can directly test those thing from your ID. Another enhancement is the til debugger. It's not done yet, but I'm still exploring that option. And there are a few other enhancements. Possible enhancement are like integration with the Algorand builder or integration with the reach lag. So that's it for today's demo. Thank you for watching this demo.
Outstanding, Satya. Thank you so much. How do we get a hold of you? What's the best way to make contributions to the repo or get in contact with you on Twitter, Discord, elsewhere?
Yeah. So my Twitter ID is let me just Satran004. Or the best way to contact me is just file a enhancement request or bug request, or if you want to see a new feature in the ID, just file a enhancement request in the GitHub repo. I think that's the best way to reach me. And another option is I think we're planning to create a channel in the Discord. That could be another option to.
That's right. Yes, actually, Jason just did that during this presentation. So if you are on our Discord channel, check the Slack. The link is in there. I'm sorry, if you're in this here, we posted it into the chat window here. So we have a link to it for joining Discord and for getting into the Algodia channel directly. Satya's in there to answer questions. Jason, myself, the rest of the DevRel team here at Algorand are also there answer these questions. It's nice, since we're on opposite sides of the world, 13 hours apart, you guys can get 24-hour service on this particular project. We really appreciate, Satya, your presentation today. It's amazing what the albudia is capable of doing, managing your nodes, managing your codes, being able to build these transactions, group them, link them, sign them, send them, test them, debug them. It does everything. It's a really awesome tool. And it works across all of our different SDKs as well. So thank you for this, and we look forward to more and more updates from you.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, everybody. We're going to take questions and answers in the Discord channel. Actually, we got time for some question and answers here, so they can come in. Also, I want to remind you in 2 weeks' time that we will have the team from Rand Labs presenting the My Algo Wallet 2.0. So we're kicking off at the same time as we did here. And do we see any questions? Lots of good, lots and lots of thank yous in here. And the questions that we did receive during your presentation, Satya, we were able to answer throughout. So we'll just give people a little bit more time in case they are actually typing in a question to do that. Otherwise, we are always happy to welcome people on the Discord channel. I should probably paste that back in there. It's already in there, but I'll do it one more time. Paste. And then it is now approaching 2 a.m. for Satya, so you probably can excuse him if he wants to go and get some sleep by now. Thank you for staying up so late for us.
I definitely need some sleep.
Well, you've earned it. You knocked this one out of the park. We really appreciate it. It'll be posted shortly. This recording will be posted shortly to algorand.com/developers, and that's also where you can sign up for future office hours. So from everyone here at Algorand and the developer relations team, Satya, thanks so much for presenting albudia to us today.
Thanks for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.